So as we are populating, I just want to go ahead and welcome everyone to this month's Restaurant Industry Town Hall. The purpose of these is to dig a little bit deeper. Full Comp is a series where I get the opportunity to chat with the people that I look up to for about an hour, and we distill that out into about 35 minutes for you guys. But it never fails that there are always questions after the show airs. And so many of you reached out with questions about today's guest, celebrity chef Jeremiah Tower, the first celebrity chef and a real hero of mine. The reason I was excited to talk to the chef initially was because he bridged the gap between the restaurateur and the executive chef, taking a principal role in the front of house and in the presentation and the mastery of the event that goes into the restaurant experience. To achieve such a level culinarily while simultaneously spending time in the front of house, making sure that people have a great time. It's a delicate balance and it's difficult to do. And in America, you were the first one that did it and did it exceptionally well. So I was super excited to talk to you about it. I'd love to take this opportunity for you to say hello to everyone and let them know where you are in the world.
Hello, everyone. I'm in Puerto Vallarta in Mexico, soon to move to the Yucatan, where I used to live, back to cochinita and scuba diving. Thank you for having me on the show, Josh. Great to see you again.
You as well, Chef. For those of you that don't know me, I am you. I'm a restaurant owner and operator that was sidelined by the pandemic, and I'm trying to find my way forward. And the way I've chosen to do that is not by figuring out through trial and error, which was the first 20 years of my career. What I've decided to do now is talk to the people that have done it, that have achieved amazing things, and try and distill out if there is a replicatable recipe for success in the restaurant industry. That's what led to Full Comp, and that's what's led to these industry town halls. We can go ahead and get started, Chef. The first question that we got from the folks out there is about labor, which is the issue of the day. And they're wondering, how can they attract and retain great employees in an industry that functions like a revolving door?
Well, I mean, the issue today is pay. I mean, the level of pay. Minimum wage is just not working anymore. I think you have to have a restaurant that is so full, so successful, making so much money that you can really pay your employees. But it's not just that. I mean, you've got to inspire them. You've got to be there yourself. You've got to be doing every job that they do better than they are, or at least trying to, showing that you can do it. And then occasionally you take them to Paris for lunch.
I think
Los Angeles.
Exactly. I think you bring up a great point, and I think it's something to unpack. One of the things that is said about you time and time again at all of your restaurants is culture. There was an evolved culture there, that even though the work itself is grueling and is always grueling, that there was a lightness and there was an excitement and there was an enthusiasm to the team that worked for you and with you. How were you able to cultivate that culture?
Well, because we used to do, events like Meals on Wheels in New York and Los Angeles, and I would take the staff, but not just, Mark Franz, my chef. I would take waiters and busboys and everything, and they'd come back and say, we just went to this amazing restaurant in New York, and we're going to have these ideas for stars. So everyone was competing, to have the latest, best idea. So it was competition with a reward at the end, a bungalow at the Beverly Hills Hotel. I mean, I once rented a villa for 6 months in Italy, and all the staff, they drew lots to see who could go in and spend a month there at my cost, of course. But they came back with the most fantastic ideas, and the restaurant just took a whole new leap forward as a result.
It's about the intangibles, right? It's about creating a culture and an environment where learning
Right.
is encouraged.
Yes, but also, I mean, how can anybody know what a great restaurant is unless they've been to one? How can they know what great service is unless they've had it? So I would take them to Harry Cipriani in New York, and show them amazing service. One weekend, we just flew to the Crillon in Paris because we heard that the breakfast, was the greatest in the world. And I took 3 managers with me, and we came back, and they had all these incredible ideas, which I didn't have to suggest to them, you must do this. They wanted to do it. They did it. And the staff was very excited. And of course, everybody wanted to be the next 3 to go to wherever. So it's that having fun, constantly changing. The menu at lunch changed every day. The menu at dinner changed every day. I mean, that was complete insanity, but it kept an amazing energy going in the restaurant.
Well, and I think there's all. Go ahead, Chef.
I'm not sure I would do that again, but I didn't know we couldn't do it, so we did.
Well, and I think that the conversation has also shifted with this topic in the way that it's not that restaurants are losing employees to other restaurants anymore. The industry at large is losing employees. And I'm wondering, if you were trying to lure outsiders into the industry, what would your sales pitch be?
Well, I can only think of the best people who came to Stars, like Dominic Crenn walked in one day and said, "I want to work for you." And I said, "There, start cooking." My lawyer now, I mean, he showed up at 17 and said, "You're going to hire me." So I said, "Well, go peel those 20 cases of tomatoes and then come back and tell me if you want to do it." I think that you have to lead the way and have to show that actually they're getting something out of it rather than just minimum wage. It has to be a lot of fun, it has to be education, it has to be new things happening every day. And also, I mean, I remember the time in the front of the house when a naked homeless person streaked through the restaurant. And I knew that if I let that happen, if I tried to hide the fact that it happened, everyone would think, the restaurant's out of control, nobody's in control here. And I want to talk about managers. So I stopped him. I said, "Get this man a glass of champagne." There he was, homeless, naked in the middle of the restaurant. The restaurant was packed. Everybody, of course, he was terrified and fled without his champagne. But the whole restaurant stood up and clapped. It was a standing ovation because it was fun. I mean, it's that kind of edge that you have to keep. And I don't care what your education has been, any job that's got that kind of edge is fascinating. Whether it's a restaurant, hotel, anything in the hospitality industry should be right on the edge without tipping over.
Absolutely.
So I would say, come and join us and have a wild ride.
I love it. For those in the audience, I want to let you know that this is a multi-way conversation. So there's a Q&A section, there's a chat section. Please be sure to populate it with your questions as we go. We'd love to hear from you. Next up, Chef, what are the most important details in creating a great culinary program?
What do you mean by culinary program? It sounds like a hotel, I mean, that sounds like Hilton or something.
I would assume that the intention was a menu. Like if you want to get attention for your food menu, for your culinary focus.
Right. Well, I mean, ingredients are always the inspiration for any great menu. I mean, you go to the market in Barcelona and your hands start shaking. You want to cook so badly, you want to cook all those things. If you're, going into Costco and you see those chickens wrapped up in plastic, I mean, they're pretty good. I mean, but you don't think that you have to start cooking right away. It's the ingredients always that are the inspiration. So the menu should be done by the ingredients, from the inspiration of the ingredients. If you, as in the old days, in San Francisco, the old French restaurants, they thought to be a serious restaurant, you had to have Doversol and foie gras and all that sort of thing. Well, in those days, when I started at Chez Panisse, foie gras came in a can, it was disgusting. Doversol has been frozen for 4 months. So a great culinary program comes from great ingredients and your inspiration, not to sort of impose your personality on the ingredients, but let them speak for themselves. And then they'll be lined up out the door trying to get into your restaurant.
I couldn't agree with you more. And you spoke to this in our initial conversation. You had said that, you know, the goal at Chez Panisse, because you didn't know what you could and what you couldn't do, was you just looked around. And that was really the inspiration for Farm to Table, was the fact that you were just using local vendors and local ingredients because that's what was at your disposal.
I mean, there were sort of very few farms, but the few that there were, we used, and that made up the menu. You know, I would go to the farmer's market, I'd go to Chinatown and see some ducks and think, okay, let's have duck tonight or tomorrow night. It's the inspiration. If you don't feel excited about the ingredients, the menu will never be exciting.
And then a follow-up question to that: you changed your menu every day, every service.
Yes.
How important is change, you think, in keeping a restaurant hot?
Well, I mean, changing them every day was a bit excessive, but as I said, yeah, we didn't know we shouldn't. But again, the market in the morning, I mean, your producers, they change, but what they have changes every day. So the menu should change. If you're going to force yourself to, you know, serve petroli sole for the next month, and what happens if there aren't any petroli sole? I'd love the opportunity to go out in the dining room to the customer and say, you know, the petroli sole wasn't very good tonight, so we have something else. Even if it was perfect, you need to, you know, spread a few lies like that to keep everybody interested.
Absolutely. Here's a question we got a lot is, how do I become a destination restaurant? How, outside of, let's say, menu design, let's talk about the intangibles, the things that drew people to your restaurant. Using stars is a great example. And I think Chez Panisse, this holds true as well. It was, when you opened it, it was off the beaten path. It wasn't in a particularly great building and in a beautiful area of town. And you managed to draw the crowd in. How did you do that?
Well, Stars, of course, was in an area that everyone said I was insane to open there. I mean, it was garbage flying through the front and back door, the homeless. I mean, it was pretty disgusting. But it was in the center of the entertainment industry, of the ballet, the symphony, and the opera. So I knew that people would, you know, have a glass of champagne and some oysters before going to the performance, and then come back and have champagne and oysters or dinner after the performance. And meanwhile, we'd get the, you know, the usual 7 to 9 o'clock reservations. So we did, you know, 2.5 turns a night. And I knew, I figured that would happen because we were 5 minutes walk from all the performing places. But that wasn't just enough. I mean, any of famous people coming in to sing or play the piano, you know, at the symphony, I would make sure that they came and had a wonderful time and a free time. So when, for instance, Rudolf Nureyev was in town doing The King and I, he came every night to Stars. He'd come in and do a pirouette in the middle of the dining room. And so people would come to see all of that. So I filled the restaurant with famous people, and the restaurant filled up, you know, with people who wanted to see famous people. So you just kept it alive. And a destination, I always think of those restaurants in Italy and Tuscany that are sort of an hour and a half, 2 hours from your hotel, often some valley in the incredibly dark, no street lamps and everything, but it's a 3-star, 2-star Michelin restaurant. And it's just a perfect little place. So you have to be the best in town. That's what makes a destination. That's what fills your restaurant and makes it a destination.
And it's a holistic idea, right?
If it's a hamburger you're serving, make it the best in town. If it's seafood, have the best in town, and, you know, make it fun. People will always come back to have fun in a restaurant. You go to a restaurant and it's a great one, but you think, you know, when will I come back? if it's so formal and fabulous, but not much fun, you think you'll come back in 3 or 4 months. I designed Stars so that people would come back 3 times a week. It helped that it was
Well,
a great bar.
Well, I was going to say you built it out to be experiential. I mean, it's when you look at the dining floor, it was almost like a stage where
Yes.
everyone could see everyone else having a good time, and all of that went into the design that you created for that overall experience.
Yes, I mean, it was as much a circus as a restaurant.
And it's, I think that food is objective or very subjective in the way that, either people like it or they don't, and everyone comes into it with their own taste. But experience and fun can be objective. There are certain things that everybody enjoys. And when you compete at that level with those things, I think it's a lot easier to become memorable.
Absolutely. And my suggestion is look at the documentary that Anthony Bourdain did on me for CNN. You can see it on Netflix, The Last Magnificent, because in there, the staff talk about what made Stars interesting and great and a destination. So better to hear it from them than from me, I'll just say how fabulous I am, but actually they tell me how Stars was.
Yes, chef. Yes, agreed. Here's a question I wish I had asked you 20 years ago. They say, I'm new to the industry. If you were to start your career all over again today, how would you build your career to reach the same level of success?
That's a fantastic question, because just the word today, right, as this pandemic may or may not be lifting, again, it's all about, the location, of course. I mean, that's, everybody knows that. And I would just get some people. I mean, right now is the most amazing time to open a restaurant. If the variants of this virus and it doesn't come back, I mean, if we're actually on the road out of this thing, then this is the best time to open a restaurant, because you could actually go to a restaurant that's been closed for a year and have them say, you know what, guys, I don't have $5-6 million to do this, but just give me your lease and I'll run the restaurant for you. That's one opportunity that will never come around again, But also people are willing to go out. They want to go out. Everyone's fed up with being locked up and locked down for a year and a half almost. I would still do a restaurant like a brasserie, like Stars, that was not just something for everyone, but everything for someone. That's the difference that we had. You could come in 3 times a week instead of once every 3 months. You could sit at the bar and have a hamburger and a glass of Chateau Lafite. You could, have a special, glass of Chateau Yquem and rare roast beef, You could come in and have a 5-course dinner. You could come in as Daniel Steele would, dressed in several $1 million worth of jewelry and clothes for the opening of the opera. And next door would be, 2 young couples who, had saved up for a year to come to Stars. That mix, because actually nobody knows what this new world is going to be. So open a restaurant that caters to it all.
That was beautiful, chef. I just want to repeat it because I thought it was such a profound thing to say, that instead of trying to be something to everyone, be everything to someone. That was awesome. Next up, chef, what food trends out there excite you?
Well, the trends that, it takes 3 people each with 2 tweezers to set up the plate. That does not excite me. I mean, I look at some of the plating going on now and think that food's cold, that food's boring. It was made way too far in advance. Too many things on the plate. I'm hoping that the trend that I see a little bit of, which is like a great fish restaurant in Barcelona. I keep saying Barcelona, but it is totally inspiring there. A perfect piece of fish that was caught that morning. 2 other ingredients on the plate, beautifully executed, without any fanfare and without the chef coming out in the dining room beating his chest like a gorilla saying, look at me. So I want to say that the little bit I see that people are believing again in great ingredients, that trend excites me.
Love it. Me too. Next up, how did you manage both the business of running a restaurant and the culinary program at the same time? And to unpack this a bit, there are a ton of successful restaurants out there that get a ton of press that don't make any money. And Stars did make money. And
Yeah.
so expanded like massively during the lifespan of the restaurant. And so how were you able to run both a successful business and a successful restaurant simultaneously?
It takes a certain excessive obsession. I mean, first, it's 80 hours a week. You have to travel around and be inspired. I mean, a lot of my inspiration, I'd go to the Zuni for lunch, or during the mid-afternoon in between the lunch and dinner shift at Stars, have a glass of champagne and sit down with cocktail napkins. And, my greatest ideas came after the first glass of champagne and before I'd finished the second. How do both the business and the culinary program? Well, I couldn't help myself with the culinary program because I'd read books, new ones from Australia, the latest one from Ottolenghi in London, that kind of thing. And my mind was just going and I'd start writing menus. The business, I wasn't a great businessman. I wished I'd had a business group that ran it for me. But you learn about healthcare and all those things that drive you absolutely crazy when you'd rather be in the kitchen. So finally, I hired a manager and opened 2 private dining rooms so I could cook every day. That's how I managed.
And did the quality of the team directly impact your ability to grow as a business?
Yes, of course. I wasn't nearly as successful at that as some of the other famous American chefs. I kept trying to say, I kept trying to sell Stars at its peak, because I always think you sell a business at its peak, and then everyone would say, well, we don't want Stars without you. And I'd say, well, what's the point in selling it? I don't need you unless you give me money. And I'm going to the beach, But the team, looking back on it, I micromanaged it too much. I should have said to the 3 or 4 of the managers, I had a management team that I really paid very well. So it was almost as if they were owners. And there was that time that Mark Franz, my executive chef, said to me, we were talking about chickens, and I was going on again and again about French chickens. And he said, if you talk about those effing French chickens one more time, I quit. I said, okay. You're supposed to have your passport with you at every time, all the time you're here at Stars. We're leaving for Paris tonight, and we did. We went to Rungis, looked at chickens, bought 5 of the, from the most expensive to the ordinary, went to a friend's restaurant, cooked them, and he said, I get it. So when we came back, he went out looking for someone to raise chickens for us.
That's an incredible story. And I guess that follows up, because I'm sure everybody's asking or thinking to themselves, those types of experiences, was that baked in from the very beginning, whether you guys had the money or not? Or was that something that as the restaurant grew, those experiences kind of came out of the success of the restaurant?
Oh, I think from the very beginning. At Chez Panisse, we didn't have any money. The restaurant in the beginning, anyway, didn't make any money. But we drank, great old Burgundies every night. Couldn't possibly afford it. But we didn't know we couldn't afford it. We didn't know that, 30-year-old great Burgundies cost a lot of money. I don't think we ever paid our bills in the beginning at Chez Panisse. So it was very naive. We had a great time. but then everybody worked like crazy, worked incredible hours, and it made Chez Panisse, what it is. So that was sort of my model. I didn't know any other way, except
Right
have,
on.
drink great champagne and get to work.
You're the first celebrity chef. What is it about you and what you did that won so much media attention? I mean, this is before the days of Instagram. I mean, how is it possible that you were written up by everyone and covered everywhere without the internet?
Well, I think it was in the late 80s that Time magazine said that I'd had more publicity than Meryl Streep. Absolute rubbish, of course, but they were making a point that how could a chef get as much publicity, seemingly, as a Hollywood star? Well, I was just, always there for the opportunity. Grab every opportunity that comes by. For instance, we were doing Meals on Wheels at Rockefeller Center, the very first one, and they showed us our little, 2 6-foot tables and a tablecloth and a $20 arrangement from Interflora. And I said, get those out of here. I sent one chef off to get flowers and tablecloths from Bergdorf Goodman. We got lights and I bribed the electricians and the engineers, incredible amount of money, and they set us up. And we were the star of the show. So Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, with their crew, and the morning shows in those days were there. Everybody was there. Malcolm Forbes came over and said, oh, hello, how are you? And I said, I'm Jeremiah Tell. And he said, I know perfectly well who you are. And so does TV. So TV went mad, And Robin Leach, Lifestyle of the Rich and Famous, they went mad. So the next few years, every time we did an event like that in Los Angeles, anywhere, the press expected theater, so we gave it to them, and we got huge coverage.
I want to build off this because I think we find ourselves in a really interesting time as an industry. And I've said this a lot on the show, that in an effort to create what looks like an effortless experience, we as restaurant owners and operators and chefs, we have hidden the harsh reality of our day-to-day from our patrons, which is the net result is that they assume that the job isn't that hard and that we're making great money. I mean, I read an Eater article recently talking about the labor crisis, and one of the people in the comment section actually said, well, if these rich restaurateurs would just pay people better, then this whole situation would go away, assuming that we're all, loaded. And it's, everybody wants the entertainment. And as a restaurateur, I want to give people that mystique. But how do you balance, establishing that mystique with having your customer understand, but not be belabored by the realities of the situation?
Well, nobody wants to see somebody sweat. So you've got to achieve this massive success without looking as if it was any work at all from the customer point of view. I think that was my instinct to do, and I think it pissed off a lot of people in the industry, other chefs. They thought, well, he's just, so easy, or so much money he can just do it. That's not what was going on. In 1983 at the Astor Mansion, when we had the Santa Fe Bar and Grill, we showed up to do a little lunch from this huge agency in New York. They were going to do a big dinner with Guy Savoy and massive press. They had 100 American journalists, food journalists there. Well, the French kicked us out of the kitchen in the morning. So I said, okay. And this is what I mean. You grab the moment and make something fantastic. I mean, we were not going to be able to even cook lunch. So I said, we're not only going to cook lunch, we're going to blow these French chefs out of the water, which we did. And that was the first time so 1983, 100 journalists, was the first time we got the front page of the food section. They created the food section in order to cover that event. Guy Savoy got one paragraph in the Christian Science Monitor. We got some, 60 newspapers, a full page. And it said, California cuisine, grilling is it, new American cuisine. And that was the day those terms were invented. But that's because disaster is facing you. So I think out of chaos and disaster come the most wonderful moments, the most creative, because you're challenged. You've got to do something. And that's a moment when you think, well, whatever I'm going to do, I'm going to do it. I'm up against the wall here, so who cares what I do? It's going to be great. And that's why now, out of this chaos, out of these problems of COVID and the collapse of the world, will come amazing opportunity. After the plague came Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci. So all you new Leonardos out there, get to work.
Right. It's
Have fun.
I look at the landscape of your career, and I see that there's so many highs, and from the outside it looks so glamorous, but I'm sure that there were difficulties and struggles along the way. I'm sure that even though it wasn't the result of a global pandemic, that you found yourself in the position of many restaurateurs today, and that there were times of struggle and self-doubt. And in those darkest moments, what did you tell yourself? Like, how did you push yourself through it when your job seems impossible, the industry seems incredibly impossible? How do you push forward?
Well, I mean, there were several moments like that, but the earthquake in San Francisco in 1989, I mean, that was closed us down. We went from 350 lunches a day to 30. We went from, in those 1980s dollars of $10 million a year, we went down to 3 or 4. So, I mean, the earthquake cost me $7 million. And that's why I expanded. That's why I went to Asia to get, franchise payments and everything. So I opened the Peak Cafe in Hong Kong, and I withdrew 500,000 out of that and put it right in Stars to keep Stars going. But, you just think, well, I can go down in the basement, turn on the gas and light a match. Or I can open a bottle of Salon Le Menil and think about this.
Right.
Go to Zuni, have lunch, and write out your plan for the next year on some cocktail napkins and get to it. As Elizabeth Taylor, that famous saying that she had to remember, that she told me, after the earthquake, it was like, pour yourself a cocktail, put on your lipstick, and get on with it. I loved her for that.
I love it. For those listening, we're about to start the Q&A section. We would love to hear from you. If you have any questions, please let me know. You are the master of media and mixed media, especially from the early days at Chez Panisse. How would you leverage social media now in terms of communicating with your customers and garnering the media attention?
Well, and it's so powerful now. You've got, all of the possibilities of social media. I even still use Twitter, for heaven's sake, occasionally. But before you had to hire a public relations person, agency or something, and they didn't know anything about the restaurant, or they would know about a restaurant group like KFC or something, but they had no clue what kind of restaurant Stars or Chez Panisse or the Peak Cafe in Hong Kong was. So you have to do it yourself. And that is a great opportunity because, again, you're up against the wall. You don't have to pay an agency a fortune to sort of screw up anymore. You can do it yourself. You can have somebody in-house. And I would have the waiters, the staff, do it for me. Competitions. Who's got the best idea? Do it. You run the Facebook page for a couple of weeks.
What do you wish you knew when you first started that you know now? What is a life lesson that you learned throughout your career that the folks listening could internalize today?
Well, thank God I didn't know anything when I started. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. Okay, the one thing I wouldn't have done was had more than one restaurant at a time, but I did that because I needed $1 million to keep the stars afloat. Everyone thought I was, traipsing around the world. Actually, I was, going to Manila and getting 350,000, going to Hong Kong and getting 500,000, so that I didn't have to lay anyone off or fire anyone from stars. It was rough, but I mean, that's what I did. But I should have stuck with one restaurant if I could have. That's the one lesson I've taken away from my career. Stars was enough.
How often do you cook these days?
Every day. Well, one of the reasons I'm going back to the Yucatan because the markets are so much more inspiring. And during the pandemic, I mean, in the beginning of the lockdown, I was relying on Costco and La Comer. And, well, Costco chickens get pretty boring after a while.
Absolutely. So we have a question from Tanner, Chef.
Yeah.
Piggybacking on the staffing issue, how do you see technology helping run restaurants more efficiently with fewer employees? What technology do you think helps attract employees? I think the bigger question here is probably, what does the restaurant of tomorrow look like today?
Oh boy, that's a very good question. I mean, if this last year and a half hadn't occurred, it's still a great question because they're evolving all the time. My inspirations for stars came from restaurants in New York and Paris and London. They've been around for a long time, which is why I came up with the brasserie concept, the kind of restaurant that you couldn't stay away from and went 2 or 3 times a week, whether it was a hamburger or a glass of champagne, just to go to the bar or have, an anniversary wonderful dinner. And I think the fast casual, I saw one in Sacramento that was absolutely brilliant. You could still get waited on if you sat at a certain place in the restaurant. I like that. I think even though Daniel Blue has just opened, the Pavilion in New York, I think that's probably going to be very, very fancy. I wouldn't do that. I still think that the casual but elegant format that attracts people several times a week rather than once every few months is the way to go, for sure.
You mentioned Dominique Crin earlier.
Yeah.
Who do you look at that's doing work out there that you say, oh, that's amazing? Who are you impressed by?
Well, if I answered that question, I could never go back to California. I'll let that one slide by.
Oh my God.
That's for sure, Dominique.
Chef.
There are others, yes.
Understood. Chef, I think that's a great place to leave it. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. And if people want to get in touch with you, they can follow you on social.
Yes, absolutely. My email is jeremiahtower@gmail.com. Any questions?
Amazing.
Happy to answer them. Happy to be in touch.
Chef, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. This has been absolutely magical.
As always with you, fantastic.
Yes, sir.
Great. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay.